Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, unschooling mom and author, bringing you interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free Exploring Unschooling ebook, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hello everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 22 of the podcast. It's the 31st of May, 2016, as I record this intro. In this episode, I ask Lainie Liberti 10 questions about unschooling. Lainie found unschooling almost by accident. She took her son Miro out of school for a year back in 2009 for a mother and son backpacking trip from the US to Argentina. At the time, she wasn't worried because she figured he would learn so much more through the trip than hanging out in a grade 5 classroom. Turns out, she learned so much that year, and Miro never went back to school. Now, in their 7th year of traveling, Lainie is co-producer and host of the weekly online show For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement, and she and Miro host Project World School, inspiring temporary learning communities around the world for teens and young adults. Over the years, they've come to describe themselves as world schoolers, and in the episode, Lainie explains the interesting distinction she makes between world schooling and unschooling, which morphs into a cool conversation about strewing. She also shares a behind-the-scenes story about her and Moreau's recent TEDx talk in Amsterdam. It was a really fun conversation, and I think you'll enjoy it too. It's so interesting to peek into the lives of other unschoolers and see the fascinating things that they're up to. Just a heads up, Lainie spoke with me from Peru, where they are right now, and the connection goes in and out a bit, especially in the first few minutes. I apologize for that, but it clears up quite nicely. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I was working on edits for the Unschooling Journey book, and in this last week, some really awesome connections came together for me, and I made some fundamental tweaks. When I ran them by my co-author, Amy, she loved them too. Yay! I was very happy about that. So now I'm working my way through those changes and I'm excited to send her the second draft of the book. Granted, I'm not sure how quickly that will go because I'm also gearing up to visit my daughter Lissy in New York in a couple of days. And I'm starting to get super excited about that. This week's quote is from Miriam Beard. "Travel is more than the seeing of sights. It is a change that goes on, deep and permanent, in the ideas of living." This quote resonates even more deeply for me after chatting with Lainie, and it also aligns well with her advice, which I found on her website. My travel advice to you is about the journey inward. We chat about this in more detail in the episode, and it makes so much sense. Of course, travel can be about new sights and activities, yet, especially with choosing extended travel, when we bring our unschooling curiosity and our desire to actively engage with the world around us, we stretch our comfort zones and our experiences become part of us, shaping our perspective of the world in deep and permanent ways. It sounds like a wonderful way to live and learn for those families who are drawn to traveling. And now, let's get on to the interview with Lainie. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Lainie Liberti. Hi Lainie.
Hi Pam.
It is so great to have you on the show. Lainie is mom to 16-year-old Miro. She and Miro came to unschooling sideways back in 2009 with what was to be a 1-year mother and son backpacking trip. She started her website, raisingmiro.com, back then to capture memories of their travels. And now, in their 7th year of traveling, Lainie is co-producer and host of the weekly online show For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement, and she and Moreau host Project World School, inspiring temporary learning communities for teens and young adults around the world. They've come to describe themselves as world schoolers, and together they recently gave a talk at TEDx Amsterdam, an independently organized TED event focused on education, whose theme this year was Born to Learn. Their talk was titled Unschooling, Making the World Our Classroom. I have 10 questions for you, Lainie, so let's dive in.
I'm ready, so I can't wait.
Question number 1. Can you share with us a bit about you and Moreau, how you found yourselves unschooling and decided to continue traveling?
Sure. We have, as you mentioned in the intro, to travel for 1 year. And I had taken my son out of school. He was in traditional, conventional school at the time. And our intention was to travel from Mexico to Argentina. And we figured, okay, 1 year would be great. There were many reasons why we decided to travel. But really, all the reasons that led us to that point were absolutely a blessing in disguise. I mean, we could talk about the economy crashing and business and our lifestyle, but basically we were at a point where we were just ready to go have an adventure. And the challenges we were facing in the United States and in California led us to, okay, you know what? We've just had a year of a lot of stress. I was absolutely heartbroken every time my son said to me that that I never spent any time with him, that I was always working, which was absolutely true. And when we decided to take this trip, I knew intuitively that 1 year travel, my son would learn way more than he would ever do. So that was sort of very, very briefly in a nutshell what led us to the point of our trip and the attitude that I had about education before I left. On a side note, I was pretty much somebody who challenged the norms and challenged everything throughout my entire life. The crazy thing is, though, I had never challenged the idea of education. For some reason, I always believed it was somebody else's job to educate my son. But with 1 year of travel, I knew intuitively that my son would absolutely learn way more through that 1 year of travel than he would in 5th grade. So I didn't really have to change my attitude about that. The conventional idea of education, I never once challenged education. I challenged everything else, but that wasn't one of the things. So as we began to travel, we together started to experience learning in the most profound way. And we were present and we were doing it together. And everything was new and exciting. And we were both so incredibly inspired to learn more about everything around us. And it became an absolute passion to learn more as the world provided more stimulus and more experiences. And the deeper that we went into our experiences, the more that we learned. And the crazy thing was, I was learning too. Again, my thought and my attitude about learning was you learn as a child, and once you're out of school, your learning is over. I really had conventional ideas about what learning meant. So all of those things were sort of turned over as we began to experience life and learning as one. And that really, defines the first year and what got us to the place that we are now.
That's really fascinating. It's such an interesting way to come at it. Like you said, you weren't even questioning the education piece, but by taking the trip, that opened your eyes to it. I found that really, really interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, question number 2. What has been one of the more challenging aspects of your unschooling journey so far?
We were about 3 years into our journey, and the biggest challenge that we came across was Miro. He turned 13, and his desire to be in community. He fell in love with the lifestyle that we were living. He was learning. We really sort of decompressed ourselves from the role of consumer. And that's huge. We could talk about that. But that's, answering this question, it was almost a side note. We loved the lifestyle. We loved living minimally. We loved being present. We loved not having any plans. And we loved being outside of the United States. There was so much that we connected with from the cultures and communities that we were visiting. But on the other hand, Miro was feeling isolated and lonely. So there was a conflict. He really loved, he was committed to what we were doing. He was committed to this minimalist lifestyle. He was committed to all that we had built and created together. But he was also, on the other hand, feeling this sense of isolation and loneliness. So we traveled back to the United States for a conference, an unschooling conference. And that was the very first time that we had met other unschoolers, although we had connected them online as I reached out to learn more about the lifestyle that we started to live. And I know I skipped a big chunk of, how we realized we were unschoolers and what that meant to our lives. But you asked about the challenge. So at that point, we had already identified with being unschoolers, and our lifestyle really meshed up with the philosophies surrounding radical unschooling. And we were very clear that we were on path doing this. So when we headed back to the United States for this conference, Miro and I shared about our lives, and we received incredible support and response. But the backwards was Miro hung out with other teens, and he ran around and we sat down, and he had these really meaningful connections with teens that were free thinking, that were out of the box, that were non-judgmental, that really saw the world like he did, even though they were not traveling. And there was so much commonality. And that was the point where he said, I found my people, I found my community, I know who I belong with, but here's the conflict. I don't want to go back to a lifestyle without these people. So what we decided to do was, because we were so passionate about the way that we were learning, we decided to bring a group of teens to Peru, where we were actually staying and loved and living and learning at the time. And in fact, I'm speaking to you right now back from Cusco, Peru. And this place has really become symbolic of our home and our spirit and our deep love of learning. So we started to organize a retreat to bring back a group of teens that we met at that particular conference, and organized our first retreat. At the time, we were calling it Project Unschool Peru, and it really described the spirit of the feelings and the what we were trying to do. We were trying to create temporary communities here in a place that we were passionate about, but it was for unschoolers. And Peru, Cusco was our main focus. 4 years later, it's really transformed into something else. And we've transformed who we are and how we identify our learning styles. And in fact, we call ourselves world schoolers now.
That is really cool how you guys managed, how much brainstorming did it take, to come up with the idea of, you wanted to keep your traveling lifestyle that you both really enjoyed, and you found this community that Moreau really wanted to connect with. I mean, what a great idea to bring some of the community to you.
Well, I have to tell you, Pam, it was really about taking care of my child's needs.
Yeah.
And, that was the main reason. We loved our life, but I had to solve a problem as parents, create an opportunity to solve a problem or to create the circumstances that would help, facilitate solving a problem. Again, as parents, we don't solve the problem. We just set up the circumstances. But I was passionate about finding a way that would, answer the problem we were having together, because this was our problem.
Yeah, that's brilliant, brilliant. This question is very similar, but just a little bit of a different perspective. What has been one of the more challenging aspects of your traveling journey so far?
Well, I think I thought about this question and I thought about how to answer it. And it occurred to me that if we're talking about the journey of 7 years, the biggest challenge that took place within the first year. And that really was the way that my son and I established and lived our relationship to money and consumerism and to owning things. That I can't say it was a challenge. It was the path we were living and going through, and it changed our perspective about owning things and the amount of money we spent on things and how we earned money, and just that relationship transformed throughout that first year. I don't think we could have started straight from Los Angeles when I owned a business and I earned quite a bit of money, and I was accustomed at that time to be able to spend what I wanted. Looking at a price tag. I mean, I was known for going into a shop and dropping $400 there and not even wincing, but, and then seeing how much it cost when I saw the bill, and, those sorts of relationships. It was a very different relationship to money that we had before. But when the economy crashed, and we decided that this was a journey that we were going to take together. We had savings, we sold everything, we had enough money that we were not going to worry about, getting by for 1 year. Plus we had a little bit of nest egg. So when we got back, we could set ourselves back up. But it certainly wasn't the budget we were accustomed to living in the United States. But the good thing was I didn't have my rent, I didn't have car payments, I didn't have insurance, I didn't have all of those other things. And I didn't have credit card bills. I paid off absolutely everything before we left the States. So starting, on this 1 year journey with no debt and a limited amount of money, however, it was basically triple the amount that we live on now. Per month. It allowed us to look at what we valued and what we spent, and again, that relationship to what we valued to money. I mean, I keep using that word, but it's something that rules everybody's lives. And that first year moving from, big loft in LA and Mercedes to traveling with our backpacks and with a limited amount of money in the bank to support us for a year, we had to look at it very differently because I wasn't working and there wasn't anything coming in. And so, if you're a regular working lifestyle, you work and then you add more and then you spend and then you add more, and it's an ongoing process. This was finite. So we really looked at consumerism from a totally different perspective. And as we started to travel through developing countries, we started to look around and see what people had. And we started to look around and we realized what people really needed. And then we looked at what we needed. And where we are now, we spend a third of what our initial budget was. We live on a ridiculously low amount of 1,000 US dollars per month for two people in our travels now. We didn't start out that way, and that wasn't our original budget for living in the United States. But that was the transition. That was, we now are very clear about collecting experiences, not things. And especially with things, you have to carry them. So.
Oh no, that's really fascinating to hear more about. I imagine it's probably something that quite a few of us think about. And with unschooling too, I see more and more there people who are taking up traveling. There's someone I did a podcast with the beginning of this year. He and his family had sold everything and started traveling. It's a way, when everyone in the family is interested in collecting those experiences, and even like you guys started, it's just for a year and we'll see what happens. It's just something to try out and see if everyone really connects with that lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
Question number 4. You and Moreau, as you said, identify more now with the term world schooling. And I love on your website, when I was reading around, how you distinguish between unschooling and world schooling. You describe your day-to-day lives as radical unschooling, with Moreau's self-directed learning being interest-led. But that there is also the learning that comes from your travel experiences, immersive learning that's not necessarily driven by interest, but rather by your environment, by where you are. Can you talk a bit about that distinction?
Absolutely. So when I first discovered that we were doing something called unschooling, I had never heard of it before. I became so absolutely excited. I started to research everything I could, and I read about all the different philosophies, and I realized it fit us like a glove. And in fact, I realized on most levels, I didn't even have to deal with de-schooling all that much. I mean, there were still, I still had some schoolish thoughts about, oh boy, really about my life. And because I saw my son learning naturally, the de-schooling didn't apply to him as much. But that was one of the areas that I learned so much just by reading, researching as deep as I could with as many blog posts and articles and books. And that's where, of course, I came across your website years ago. And one of the websites I came across was Sandra Dodds, and she wrote about something called strewing. And I thought, oh, this is brilliant. And this is, such a beautiful way for families to facilitate their kids without pushing, but just leaving little things in their path to see if their interests are sparked based on what their interests are. And then I realized, wait a minute, the world is strewing for us. And when my son and when I was sharing with him everything that I was learning about unschooling and everything that I was learning about radical unschooling and how we defined our lives as a partnership before we even knew this was an aspect of unschooling, we had agreed that whatever I was interested in as we started to learn, I would pursue and he'd support, and vice versa. So I would support him obviously through his paths of wherever his interests brought him. But when I started to read about strewing and the world, then I realized that the world was doing it for us. It became a little bit bigger than just unschooling. It really was world schooling. And that's where I really made that connection to that word.
I love that description. Yeah. And I love that you brought up strewing as well, because I think let's talk about that for a minute. I think maybe one of the things that as people come to unschooling and come across that word, they can initially be confused a bit because what's important, and as you've mentioned, is not, it's the things that come to us and maybe the things that we find we might want to drop around our children. But as you said, things that are related to their interests, right? They're not coming out of the blue. And I think the biggest challenge is sometimes parents will strew things and maybe without even knowing it, they'll have a bit of an agenda behind it. And, they'll be disappointed if their child doesn't pick something up or isn't interested in this, that, or the other thing that they're bringing into their lives. For me, that's more of a clue that we may not be deeply understanding what their interests are now, because our connections to this new thing we think they might like are a little bit off if they're not interested in any of the stuff that we're bringing up. And as you said, you guys were interested in travel and the cultures that you guys are seeing and the geography, the locations, and the whole world is just strewing all this interesting stuff in front of you, and you guys can pick up on what connects with you.
Absolutely. And there are, we come across certain, cultures or cultural traditions that do not interest us. And we come across certain ecology that does not interest us, but we come across much more that invites us to go deeper because we are engaged and interested. So, we look at, there's so much to see. And again, part of the world schooling process is really being present, and there is an actual, I would say, intentionality behind engaging in the world. And not every aspect is going to engage or interest us, but those that do, there's no avoiding it. We go deeper. We just go deeper. We're having these experiences and we're present. There's philosophical, discussions that could happen around this, around world schooling and around the process of doing it. And even though I've never had the experience being an unschooler from the get-go, living a conventional stationary life, we identify with those particular philosophies. But for us, and everything that I've read, it just goes so much deeper.
Oh, that's awesome. And that leads very nicely into my next question, because I'm sure you have lots of wonderful stories to share from your world schooling travels. And I was hoping you might share one of your favorites.
Pam, I had such a hard time in my mind thinking about what to tell you. I know you're going to ask about the TED Talk, and I will address that a little bit later on. But we had written a script for it, and it took us quite a while to really define what we wanted to share. And when we got up there, 4 minutes were taken away from the amount of time that we had to share. So I'm going to share with you one of the stories that actually didn't get told during the TED Talk because we cut it on the fly, on stage. So Miro and I fell in love with Cusco. We fell in love with the Andean culture. We fell in love with so much here. I mean, the art, the tradition, the mysticism, the philosophy. It was so inspiring. So we decided to make Cusco our home, and we ended up living here for 2 years. And one day we were at the market and we were having a juice served by Wilma, who is our favorite juice lady, who we still go to. And right next to us sat down an indigenous man and his daughter, and we started talking. And it turns out that Edson lives here in Cusco, but his family is from a town called Chinchero, which is about 40 minutes away by bus. And the town of Chinchero is famous for weaving, and I wanted to learn to weave. So we asked him, Edson and his daughter, can we come visit your family sometime? And he said, sure. So it was about 4 days later, we received an invitation. We got onto a bus with Edson and his family, and we visited his mother and his sisters. And it was this beautiful matriarch. And we sat down at their farm, and we were on the dirt ground, and they had just harvested potatoes, and they threw them in the fire. We all sat around in a circle, and they all giggled and watched us peel the skin off the potatoes, and we ate the potatoes. And it was like the tradition of sharing food, and it was just so lovely. The mother had hands that were creased and wrinkled, that were so expressive, that were, oh my gosh, they were the hands of an artist. And I was mesmerized by her hands. And then she brought out wool from the alpacas near their farm. And she taught us how to take the spool and pull it up and spin this little spool at the end and try and make these threads from the alpaca. And all around they had sheep, alpaca. There were all of these natural herbs and plants that they used for dyes. And throughout the entire day, sitting on the dirt, in a circle with these beautiful women, they showed us little by little how the whole tradition of weaving from making the spool and making the yarn, to dyeing the colors, then to taking a stake and pounding it into the ground, and then wrapping the threads around and starting to weave. And they showed us, of course, the most simplest patterns, but they also had these giant looms. And to be able to have that authentic experience with this family, this really, really beautiful family. We all giggled and chewed on coca leaves. And, after a while, it felt like we were sitting with family, our family, people that really opened up their heart and let us in to their lives. And I have to tell you, Pam, every year this is the fourth year we're bringing a group back to Cusco. We keep going back to visit that family, and they keep welcoming us, and they're watching Moreau grow up. And it's just, I'm so excited. We're going to go in 1 month to see them. And this will be, like I said, the fourth group that we're bringing of teens now that can experience this beautiful tradition in a very authentic way.
Oh, that is such a beautiful story, Lainie. I can see how that.
Thank you.
Yeah. No comment needed. That's very beautiful. It stands all on its own.
It's such a great experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. And to be able to, you've made enough a connection with them that they're excited to have you back, and you bringing the teens and young adults from your group with you, and them getting to see Moreau year after year. Yeah, it just sounds awesome. Okay, question number 6. I really enjoyed being a guest on an episode of your show, For the Love of Learning, and we talked about attachment parenting. That was so much fun. And you've been hosting that mostly weekly show for over a year now. Can you share with us something you've learned that has stayed with you?
Oh my gosh. I am the person who always asks questions. I'm always curious. And I think that actually is one of the traits of being a good unschooling parent or world schooling parent. One of the things that I just felt passionately in love with is alternative education. And once we defined within our own lives that education is really learning, I realized I had more questions than I had answers. And so when I pitched this show to this network that I knew nothing about, it was because I wanted to have a forum where I can ask questions and then hear conversations, facilitate conversations based around the idea of learning. And so we approach it from, a million different angles. There's for the love of learning, voices of the alternative education movement, there is no one right way of approaching education. And there are so many ideas and people that are filled with passion about the topic that are expressing it in their own way. And I wanted to have the opportunity to sit in and listen to a conversation and ask a few questions and learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. And I, approached the show with I'm very, I'm humble in the sense where, I don't approach this as an expert of anything. I approach it from the position of wanting to learn and facilitate a conversation that will, ultimately uncover all this new discovery. And I've also noticed when you put brilliant people together, there's nothing but brilliance that comes out of the show. So what have I learned? Everything. Oh my God. I just keep asking questions and sit back and listen and discover and learn more.
I know it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I was excited to ask everybody that I could think of, everybody that I'd come across over the years. I've always wanted to sit down and have a chat with them, yourself included. So when I started the podcast, I was excited, but holy bananas, being able to just listen to people chat about their unschooling experiences, world schooling, alternative education, even last week, chatting with Carlo, it's amazing what you learn, isn't it? It's just so fun.
Absolutely. And to have the empowerment to continue to learn, oh my goodness, it just makes me want to ask more questions.
And I think you're right. That curiosity, that base curiosity about the world, about people, about what's, just ways people, even that curiosity that drives you to watch your child and understand the messages and the ways you can support them and help them. Like back to when you were talking about you and Moreau coming up with the idea to bring people to you. I mean, that curiosity is just at the base of all our days, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I have to say that I felt like I got pretty good at facilitating discussions and conversations with working with the teens. Like I said, we're on our 4th year of facilitating and hosting Project World School retreats. And the teens are my best teachers. I'm telling you, they're brilliant. They don't hold back. And in order to facilitate a conversation with them, I had to learn all sorts of facilitation techniques. And that also, I believe, helped me quite a bit with hosting the show because, well, it's not about what I have to say. It's about what the guests have to bring to the table and giving them the freedom and the space and the encouragement to share and then to build upon what the last person said. That creates, beauty, that creates knowledge, that's learning.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's something we continue to learn over time, isn't it? That's lovely. Oh. We should probably move on to question number 7. When asked about traveling, I saw you've written, my travel advice to you is about the journey inward. And as I was thinking about that, it sounds very familiar to the roots of the unschooling journey as well, because so much of that is our inner transformation. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Absolutely. One of the things that keeps us going in our travels is the the ability to look at worldviews. And worldviews are basically the lenses that we see the world. So if I, being a female, being born in California, being born in the United States, being born in the 60s, I have all of these circumstances in lenses just based on my circumstances, just based on, the logistics of where I was born and raised. I also have cultural, preferences. Every single person has these preferences that color the way that we see the world. So there are cultural, there are national, there are, economical, there are, every single filter that you can think of, you just put them on top of how you see the world. Almost reminds me of, those machines at the optometrist where they like slide another glass thing in front of you and, they're checking.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's what it reminds me of. And most of the time, we don't question those filters. We just see the world as we see the world. But what travel does is it allows you to look at other people's worldviews and examine why it either A may be different than your own, or B even be contrary to the way that you see the world. And it allows you to go inside and really define what works for you and get rid of what doesn't. And so worldviews are something that we talk about a lot. We examine our own prejudices, our own filters. And in actuality, our outer experiences are really a way for us to develop who we wish to be internally.
That's a great way of putting it. And I love the way what you talked about how seeing other people's worldviews helps you or inspires you to question your own. And when I'm thinking about my unschooling journey and what it was prompted by and how I started questioning those, for me, being in one place, it was looking at my children because, you know what, they hadn't yet absorbed a lot of the cultural or conventional messages. So seeing them started to help me start to recognize the filters and the judgments that I had just been taking for granted at first. Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's the same process, different words, different constructs, but it's the same exact process. And I think for us, travel has really become our vehicle for transforming who we are. And it's our vehicle. You could do the same experience living a stationary life, but this just happened to be what resonated for us.
Oh yeah, no, it's beautiful, beautiful lifestyle. Question number 8. In April, let's get back to that beautiful TED Talk. You and Moreau gave the talk at the education-focused TEDx event in Amsterdam, titled "Unschooling: Making the World Our Classroom." And in the show notes, I will definitely share a link so that people can enjoy it as well. I watched it and loved it. Can you tell us a bit about the experience? Just
Sure.
a bit, Lainie.
Wow. Well, we were asked to do the TED Talk, and we were actually, right before we were going into a retreat, we were heading into the Amazon jungle. And we knew that when we got out of this retreat, we would have basically 3 weeks to prepare, rehearse, and deliver this talk. And we had all this stuff that we had to do in between, like, write the talk out, figure out our travel plans, raise money for our intern that's been traveling with us. It was crazy, but we did it. And Miro will tell you the most stressful part about this process was rehearsing. And so I wrote the script, we worked on it together, but basically, I wrote the whole thing. And you would think since I wrote it, I could remember it. So what I discovered about myself is I do not memorize things very well. I did everything in terms of we did over 100 rehearsals. I recorded myself reading it and listened to it. I did everything humanly possible to memorize this thing, and I couldn't remember lines. It was crazy. So the stress that led up to the delivering the talk was there because it was a lot to accomplish in a short amount of time. But when we got there and we got on stage, and the night before, I said to Miro, guess what? I'm just going to wing it. He's like, all right, yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to wing it. But I had my cards, and so I winged half of it, and I was able to refer to the cards, the other half. But right before we got onto stage, we were told that we had 14 minutes, and our talk was 18 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Like, okay. Miro was brilliant. He had the ability to memorize, deliver, and as I was there watching, there's no reason I need to be up here. He needs to just deliver this stuff. He was so articulate and wonderful. So we did a little bit of the back and forth, but it was basically edited on the fly. And not knowing any of those behind the scenes things, you probably wouldn't know it, but that's it. That was a little bit of the behind the scenes experience of what went into delivering our TED Talk. When we got off the stage, we felt so good. And I could not have been more proud, of course.
Wow, no, none of that behind the scenes stuff was visible at all to me when I watched it. I thought you guys did great, and Moreau is just so fun to listen to. I could listen to him all day talk about the things you guys have done. It was really, really cool. So congratulations. Yeah, there you go. That's brilliant. Question number 9. I know you've talked a bit about how Project World School came to be, the inspiration behind it. I was wondering what kind of feedback you've been getting from past participants.
Incredible feedback. And in fact, we just realized that this year we have more returning participants than we do have new participants, which means wow. People are coming to 2, 3, 4, and 5 retreats. And we haven't really done that many, so that's great. The feedback has been incredible. There's something really contagious about having these really deep, out of your comfort zone experiences in a group of your peers that's totally supportive, that's, oh my gosh. I would just urge anybody who's interested to go to our Facebook page and watch some of the video interviews of the past participants, and you'll hear from their mouths, their words, what they felt about the experiences. They're incredible. We are about ready to launch I think this will be our 3rd this year. 3rd, Miro's nodding. Yes, it's going to be our 3rd this year. We have a retreat already in Mexico. We did one in the Amazon jungle. We are now going to launch our 4th Cusco retreat, where we take a group to Machu Picchu. And then after that, we're heading to Wales for a organic farm retreat. And then finally, in November, we have a retreat in Thailand.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I saw some of those announcements. It's beautiful. And I will definitely have links for people in the show notes to all the websites and Facebook pages. And you can sign up for the newsletter too, right? So that people can stay on top of that.
Perfect. Exactly.
Ah, brilliant. Okay, question number 10. And this is one that I've been asking all my 10 questions interviewees, I guess. Looking back now, what for you has been the most valuable outcome from choosing unschooling?
The relationship I have with my son and the beautiful relationship that I've been able to forge with all the teens that have come into our lives. I don't think I would have been as open and respectful and approached life on such a partnership with this group of people, including my son, of course, had I not discovered unschooling as a philosophy. So, yeah. Oh, and I have to add the permission to be a life learner. It gave me back the permission to learn, to go back to, world school, to go back to being the natural learner that we're all wired to be.
Oh, that's a really great point. Yeah, it's true. When you think about it, because conventionally, those filters and messages we get when we're an adult, we're supposed to, have our learning done, right? And to
Absolutely.
realize that no, this is something that we're doing. This is a lifelong thing, and that's not just something that we want. A message we want our kids to get. We want to be that lifelong learning person. That's what we discover when we get there, right?
Absolutely.
And teens are awesome. We'll just say that.
I love it. I feel so blessed to be able to working with this incredibly dynamic group of learners. Oh my gosh, I'm so blessed to have this opportunity.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Lainie. I really enjoyed speaking with you. And before we go, do you want to let people know where they can get in touch with you online?
Sure. You can just type into your browser, projectworldschool.com, and that's where you'll find all of our retreats. For our personal blog, please visit raisingmiro.com. Also, I've been facilitating a world schooling group on Facebook, and we just passed over 10,000 members. And so this is a movement that's growing. And if anybody is interested in combining learning with travel, please join us there, and that's World Schoolers. So besides that, I just Google me, and I'm available, through social media everywhere. So thank you, Pam. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of your show. I'm really, really honored.
Oh, I'm honored that you came on too. It was an amazing conversation. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. You can also get your free Exploring Unschooling ebook at livingjoyfully.ca/exploring unschooling. If you'd like to connect, you can also find me on Facebook at Living Joyfully. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.